I got to know Pete on a walk over to MIT with Zach down the river, and I walked into Pete's office, and there were the carcasses of oh, here we go. I was also surrounded by, messy piles of books and ungraded exams, probably, and the carcasses of various Apple and IBM style yellowing, machines, PCs, and that. And there was Pete behind his desk, and this looked exactly to me like someone being interviewed for a Nobel episode. An emergency pediatric fellow at the time with foster children. So that wasn't it wasn't like my daily view of the world, like I was on a Nobel episode. And so I was very impressed just with the setting. And then we talked about, the three of us, Zach, Pete, and I, Pete's guardian angel vision. So Zach referred to this actually still being up, and apparently extremely valuable, ga.org domain. But it's also really worth noting, the web was essentially kind of finalized around 1992, and Pete described how the web should be used in healthcare extremely articulately by 1994. And there was no one else talking about this at the time. I was aware of. And the vision was that the web would take care of you from the time you were born. A process would be spawned, and you would be cared for in terms of your record, your education, your decision support around your care, negotiation of your health care benefits. And it was an extremely compelling vision. It was already actually being, by the time I saw it, studied in the context of an art grant. And Adrian's partner in crime, Sean Doyle, was programming away. Bill Greenspun was programming away. And this seems really pretty cool. And where did this come from? Well, from what I heard, from the story I heard, Pete, his Holocaust surviving parents, were now facing another challenge, which was being cared for by the Kaiser Permanente system, which now is an exemplary healthcare system in many ways. It uses data probably better than most other settings in healthcare. But at the time, it's very disconnected and chaotic. And he would, from across the country, try to take care of his parents and make sure that they got the tests that they needed, and that they got those diagnostic, sometimes invasive diagnostic procedures only once, not twice, because they couldn't find it in the original medical record. And he had the idea that the record should be under the control of the patient, and that physicians would look into the record that was the patient-controlled record. So this vision actually led to a whole series of projects that got me very much into biomedical effects. This is really what brought me in. And the idea was, let's build something like this. And so with Zach's leadership and Pete's, we put in a bunch of grants. I was still a postdoc fellow. I was a faculty member at the hospital, a postdoc in my informatics training. And we started to put in grants. And we got one small piece of it funded. It was called PAIN, the Patient Inter-Networked Notary and Guardian. And that then later became Indivo, And that led to major uptake in the tech sector by Microsoft, who took the code base, turned it into HealthVault, Google, who took the model and turned it into the original Google Health, and Dossier, a consortium of large employers that turned it into an employer-based record system, and hired us for millions of dollars to build it out for their employees. To make a very long story short, all of those efforts failed. Being 25 years ahead of your time has its drawbacks. But if you look at the business plans of Silicon Valley today, they are very Guardian Angel-like. Most people driving those plans forward don't know about Guardian Angel, but we do tell them. Some of the folks driving these plans forward do know about Guardian Angel. And if you look at Apple's plans, they're bringing the record onto the phone in ways that can happen from multiple sites of care, giving the patient a copy of their record, upon which apps can be built. If you look at Google, they're probably going to do something like this, but no one knows exactly. And then there's a whole bunch of other companies that are getting into the space and taking advantage of these new methods for interoperability. And as soon as that interoperability is there, this is the business plan that emerges all over the place. Let's get every patient's record together under their own control. So this is a major, major legacy that goes on today. Another interesting thread that I really benefited from Pete is very randomly, he invited me to a meeting that he was going to have with two guys from DARPA. And, you know, to meet someone from DARPA, that would be pretty cool or scary. So we had this meeting with these two guys, who I described as sort of the men in black. And they were sitting there up in 545 Tech Square, and they say, how can you use informatics to detect anthrax? I was like, okay, you know, there's like weird, and then there's planet weird. We're like, now we're talking about planet weird, because anthrax, bioterrorism was actually not part of the common household dialogue at the time. It wasn't part of TV shows really very much. This was like, wow, this is, you know, this is serious. And these guys had brought together under Al Gore $50 million from multiple branches of the military to actually get on top of an informatics approach to biosurveillance. And so we actually didn't apply for the DARPA money initially, but we did apply with colleagues from Children's Hospital, with Bill Long and others, for a grant from the AHRQ. And we started pioneering in this field of biosurveillance together.
I want to add, so this was really, thanks to Pete, a weirdly recent move, because then Ken, on September 10th, 2001, before a mostly empty auditorium, started talking about terrorism and biothreats. So that was one day before 9/11. Then 9/11 happens, and Ken cannot stop the pressure from coming towards him.
Yeah. So it was another early set of insights, and taking that forward, I really attribute Pete's vision just to even have that meeting in the first place, and then to really help us take that forward into a major funded stream. And a lot of CHIP projects have been built on that initial set of ideas that you could actually take health data and use it to understand population health as well. Individual health data could be used to understand population health. This was a big thing. We were actually, within a couple of years, by the time September 11th hit, we actually had systems, automated systems, that were detecting spikes in influenza-like illness across Massachusetts eventually. At the time, it was just a couple sites, to detect anthrax, which produces a flu-like illness. And interestingly, if you look at Pete's legacy in terms of the network and nodes, at Boston Children's Hospital Computational Health Informatics Program now, we are 6th generation with Pete as Zach's mentor, Zach as mine. Now, six generations of 6th generation is a faculty member. Just to give you an idea of how this has progressed over the last 25 years. So let me just mention one or two more things about Pete. So, and also it led to very interesting things that we got to see the beginnings of. Pete and I, it became, as Jack said, we became very popular after September 11th because we were actually really thinking about this problem. And Pete and I were down for one meeting, and all of a sudden somewhere in Washington, maybe the Pentagon, we were in the office of Admiral Poindexter, from the War contract up there. Those of you who are too young to remember, look it up. It was a big deal at the time. It wasn't necessarily all good. And it was this guy, Ted something, Ted Senator, was imagining this new program. This really freaked us out because it was called Total Information Awareness. Okay, so this is a long time before Snowden and friends, but the idea was that all data would be looked at all the time, and any pattern of badness, like sheep dying, like a spike in sheep, this is an example, sheep dying in Australia somewhere, might have meant that some terrorists were testing anthrax, and therefore, put it all together, credit card bills and everything. So that really was, this idea of surveillance has had many threads going forward, one of which is really about improving healthcare. So, and Pete was also could be a tough love kind of mentor. So first of all, as Zach was talking about this wonderful tradition at MIT where you're shot down constantly while you're trying to get out your first idea, there's a corollary to that, which is that after you've been reduced to sort of some quivering jello when you're trying to present the idea, what you'll hear then within sometimes hours, maybe a couple of days, is the very people who challenge your idea actually expressing your idea as if it was their own. And I'm not talking exactly about stealing an idea, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just really talking about the fact that it's all about the intellectual discourse. And in other words, a good idea was going to be challenged no matter what, okay? And it is healthy in some ways to experience that and to learn to operate in that environment. Tough love example is I was going to turn in a grant. Pete was on it and was supposed to read it for me. And it was my first RO1. And he didn't read it until pretty close to the deadline, but he did read it. And the night before it's going to go in, or something, he says, "This thing's not ready, abandon ship," which was exactly what I did not want to hear at that moment. But it turned out he was exactly right. And we spent the next 6 months until another grant cycle getting more preliminary data, writing the abstracts with Pete's help, submitting a couple of papers, and eventually, and on the next round it was funded. He was exactly right. So there's a lot of tough love at MIT in the Pete Szolovitz modus operandi, but all really intended to help his mentees achieve success. I just want to say I'm extremely grateful. We have, we credit Pete wherever we can. We just talked about it at Chip 25 in our New England Journal piece on patient-driven medicine. It begins with Pete Szolovitz. It's a very widely read piece, and I encourage everyone to really look back at the work of Pete in the early days, the papers that Zach referenced, and to really put it in the context of now. The entire business plan of Silicon Valley right now, some significant percentage can be traced back to those ideas. So thank you all for doing that.
Don't really, but I feel like we can. Why don't we do a question while we're setting up slides?
Sure, ask a question. Yeah, come on. I just explained that was tradition, so go for it. Show me that the tradition exists. Introduce yourself for those of us who don't know you.
I'm David Sontag. I'm a professor at MIT, working in healthcare. All thanks to Pete, by the way, who got me into this field and got me at MIT. About the Guardian Angel project. So I am one of those sort of companies that are building business plans around this idea now. And what I'd love to hear from you and from others in the room are, from your perspective, what do you think Silicon Valley is doing wrong, or what do you think Silicon Valley could learn from these original efforts?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting because when we go into these conversations with absolute leaders in the Silicon Valley sector, really at the top, the conversations I would say are maybe 0.7 as detailed and sophisticated as the conversations we were having about our
0.7 out of 1 or 0.7 out of 100?
Out of 1. Okay. So, I mean, the conversations that we were having sort of in the lab meetings about this as we advanced it really anticipated many of the problems. We were trying to solve those very early on. What we saw in the first round of this, which was Microsoft Health Vault, Google Health, Dossier, what we saw was then a true lack of attention to two things. One was interoperability in healthcare, and two was really understanding healthcare from a technology perspective. We don't want to assume that patients are really looking for more app engagement, for example, outside of a very specific set of use cases. So what I'll say before Zach jumps in, I'll say, you know, if you look at Apple, what they've done, which I think is good, is first of all, they've done, like we did with Ping and Indigo, a privacy-first perspective. It was so early in privacy and cybersecurity that the Guardian Angel team and the Ping team had to invent its own encrypted data structures. There was no off-the-shelf technology for this. It was way ahead in that role. So one is we've been doing all of that. The other is that it's the best kept secret. Most people don't know that you can get your data on your phone. And it's because there's nothing really that much to do with it yet. They're not going to blow their wad right now. They're getting ready and taking incremental steps until there's really something to do. But it's very clear that those steps are being taken. So it's really about the understanding what patients need and then also focusing on the interoperability. These were two big flaws in that first round, but it's fairly well recognized in Silicon Valley what those flaws were.
So first of all, David, thank you for reigniting the tradition. We really should be taking advantage of the fact that there's so many smart people in this room to talk about more interesting things than Pete. So, Pete, I'm going to ask you to think about your response because I'm going to state my opinion in as sharp edge a way as I can, and so think about your response. So, it's, I think, a very interesting play is happening, and I'd like to, you could slice it in different ways. In fact, one of the the key skills I learned from Pete in talking about things or even writing about things is create a taxonomy. Divide the problem into 2 or 4 interesting bits. I'll divide it into 2 bits. One is getting the data, the other is doing something interesting with it. On getting the data, we really have 2 different models, the patient-controlled model and the institutional model. I don't think it's too difficult for us to imagine that it's going to be hard to get computer scientists in the next 5 years access to enough hospital data within hospitals. There'll be islands of excellence where you have, like here at Brigham, enough nerds who can know how to access the data or go through the API that we develop to get it. But that's going to be the exception. Then there are the companies whose business it is to aggregate the data. And those new school are like Google, that is running deals with various companies, various healthcare systems that are probably a little bit too clever by half about what the implicit understanding is behind the contracts and the way they should use the data. And the applicant, so hold that thought. And then there's the, as Ken outlined, the Apple-oriented version, which is a patient-controlled data storage, where if you want to provide decision support, the patient, you, the consumer, will have to explicitly allow access to that data. And this is something that we can take pride of, because that API, the Smart Health, the Smart Fire API, was actually developed by us. But in the case of being better lucky than smart, Ricky Bloomfeld, who was at Duke and was programming our API on top of their Epic system, that got acquired by Apple. And as a result of that,
And Pascal, who worked on Indevo.
and Pascal, but Ricky has had a leadership position high enough at Apple so that he's been in charge of the now 340 implementations of hospital APIs, and he's estimating that within 3 years there'll be 1,400 hospitals that have access to it. So, and that's interesting because your ability to access Google's data store is going to be limited, but if you know how to do the right social marketing, your access to literally millions of patients' records is going to be different. Now about use. As Ken says, the use cases are not that spectacular at the moment. Yeah, I am being generous. In fact, as I recently said when I went to visit Marjay at Vector Institute, is the most high-profile, high-impact use cases are all going to be about reimbursement. You can actually conceive of a reinforcement learning project around the rules of reimbursement. Whereas it's hard to do reinforcement learning around medicine because it's probabilistic, not well-defined rules, as opposed to go or reimbursement. And so Google's going to make money because incremental 1% gains in reimbursement is a lot of money.
Do you mind if I interrupt you?
No.
You're not answering my question.
Okay, go.
So what I want to know is of the original use cases, for example, what are the use cases that we should be thinking about in today's time?
So what the use cases should be.
What can we learn from the past?
Okay, so Adrian, I'm going to hand you the microphone in a second. So one, safety. Lots of unsafe. So in the guardian angel model, I'm not saying there's a business case around it. There's a human case around it. I would pay for it, but what am I? And which is bad things. This is the original guardian angel. Please do not sew off the wrong leg. Sew off the one that has the necrosis in it. Please don't give me the antibiotics that I am known to be allergic to, even though that electronic medical record does not know. Please don't give me a drug that I'm already being treated for. Medicine does so many harmful things that just clearing that away would be a huge benefit, impactful benefit. The business plan around it is not great. That's one. Number two is the areas where doctors admit that they are not experts. That includes genomics. So, decision support around genomics is great because doctors don't think they know enough of genomics. It's also true that they don't know enough about cardiology, but they won't admit to it. They will admit to it in genomics. So go where they admit their weakness. Second of all, and it's related, cancer genomics. God forbid you have a relative who has a cancer, doing the genomic informed treatment is really, really different, life-changing, and people will pay a lot of money out of pocket. So it's both a real case and a business case. And
I have one more.
you have more, go for it.
Well, the original contention, which is that the record is fragmented all over the place in ways that are unsolvable. And
But what do you care?
why do we care that the record is fragmented? Because the completeness of the record is very important to assess the patient.
Says who?
Okay. Well, let's say we wanted to even do a simple outcome study, or we wanted to.
Who cares about outcomes?
This is small MIT here. So I'll just say, a lot of people care, and the patient cares because they want to go to a new physician and present the record to them. And the health information exchange, even though the components of the sort of the loudest megaphone components of health information exchange are all within the hospitals right here. And yet, not one byte of data flows between the hospitals in a truly clinically impactful way, which tells you what to actually be paying attention to in terms of assessing the current state of defragmented records over time. So when the country decided to invest $48 billion in electronic health records, this other model would have been potentially viable. But what we decided to do is create the silos with an assumption that we could use health information exchanges, which tend to be sort of for-profit or not-for-profit entities that try to do this but haven't done it very well. So that I think that's another use case that what was gotten wrong with the health information exchanges would solve the problem.
So really quickly, let's hear from you, and then let's keep moving with the schedule a little bit, just so that we can.
We're going to have Adrian short and then Pete long.
Sure, Adrian. I'm going to answer your question directly. All of the cases are going to be away from the hospital. In other words, anything that the guardian angel model implements and succeeds at, including for the economic reasons that Ken mentioned, are going to be things like telemedicine, like medical tourism, like Google, Dr. Google, like everything about the overbuilt and overly expensive hospital infrastructure that we have, including here, is going to show up as the use cases for the guardian angel model. And it's very interesting that the work that is being done in that lab isn't really designed to do this. It is not patient-directed exchange. It is feeding this idea that you're going to aggregate the records inside the Apple phone instead of leaving them in place and using them from where they are. And I'll stop there.
That was the briefest I ever heard you speak. Congratulations.
So I'll just reiterate what Zach said. So when Adam Bosworth read the original Guardian Angel paper and came to see me, he was VP of something at Google and was head of Google Health. And he came and he said, I like this idea, we're going to implement this. And of course, with Google, so we can never fail at anything because we're really good. And I said, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for two reasons. One is that you're not paying enough attention to getting the data in. So it was very early. There were not standards. There weren't things like Smart on Fire. Epic hadn't yet created the monoculture so that you could tap into its data. So in fairness, they tried. I went to a meeting in Mountain View where they had a lot of different health plans come in and talk to them about how to get access to their data, but they didn't succeed. They didn't have the case for it. And I said, that problem will be solved eventually. I was, of course, over-optimistic about how soon it actually would be. But I still think that that problem will be solved. The other problem is that if you got a perfect version of my medical record in my pocket, nobody would ever use it. Because, when I go to my general practitioner at the MIT health plan, it's not going to pick up my phone, or it's not going to, scan a barcode and go to some URL and look up my medical records. So unless those records are integrated into this practice, it's useless. And even though it's very satisfying to have them. And that problem, I don't think we have a good solution for yet. So if I were trying to hallucinate a company, that's the problem I would try to hallucinate a solution for. But I don't know what the solution is.
Jumping very briefly. Wouldn't it make sense if your phone was
Who are
smart
you?
enough to... I'm Alois Gallus, I'm a professor at MIT and a colleague of Pete.
And a huge admirer. My question is, shouldn't your phone be able to sort of know what is the relevant knowledge as it's overhearing your conversation with the doctor, or if it knows the type of appointment that you have, to offer the relevant knowledge rather than to sort of tap into the whole record?
Yes, of course, but that may be an AI complete problem.
But by the way, Pete, I just want to say that I do think Apple may have solved the problem for us, because I just looked at my iPhone. I have a better record of my visit to Brigham and MGH and Brigham than the Epic people in Epic. More time ordered, and so I could create a decision support app that would see my support, my status in context of their health record.
Well, so the thought I had was that your doctor should be using your health record instead of the hospital's health record as the basis for decision making. But until this august institution starts training people to think that way, it's not going to happen.
I was just going to say, how many seconds does a doctor let a patient talk before he interrupts them?
Burn.
But I think, like, for all of his warts, I remember going to one of Edward Tufte's conferences, and for all of his warts, he made this interesting point about how, doctors don't listen to patients. So that's why whenever I go into the doctor, I come in and I have a written card of 5 things that they are not allowed to leave until they answer these questions. And unless you present them with that list and hand it to them, and they're holding it in their hand and looking at it, they will not answer your questions, because there's no way to force a doctor to answer your questions. That type of thing is...
That's a card.
Yeah.
I think your phone should be that card.
Yeah, but it has to be a way, you have to have a system in place to force the doctor to listen to what you're saying, to get the relevant information in a way that they don't just dismiss you as, oh, another idiot using this app. And these are the questions that you better answer on not leaving. That's a kind of problem.
All right. Before Tristan goes, we are asking every time you guys not declare this session over.
Yeah, let's let Leo speak.
So we will pick this up, I'm sure it sounds like this.